If you could look at my dad right now, you might think that he's been a glorious celestial being all his life. But no, this is not the case. In fact, he's had many occupations. Many of you here probably remember him as the school teacher with the bow tie, while others of you could clearly see by his outfit that he was a Boy Scout. There are probably even a few of you here that remember him as a camera with a campaign hat. I know one group of grandkids who will, at least in part, remember him as a bottomless package of gum. He liked to tell me, grandkids are your reward for not killing your kids. So, if you wanted to know where we ranked. He was so many things to so many people that it would be impossible to put into words. And despite Allison and Leif's valiant attempts, and all of the wonderful tributes written by many of you, the fact remains that his full Entish name is just too long for this brief moot. There is, however, one rather hasty word that I could use to describe him. Whether it was in the classroom or around the campfire or in the living room of our home, my dad was a storyteller. And it didn't matter if it was his own story or a borrowed one. The best thing about any story my dad told is that it was always true. Sometimes he could just let the stories be, but most of the time he thought that we had to learn something from them. And as I thought about my dad, I remember one story which he often taught from. It's called The Man Who Planted Trees by Jean Giono. This is the story of Elzéar Bouffier, a shepherd, later turned beekeeper, who, unbeknownst to most other people, spends every day humbly and diligently planting trees. By doing this, he ends up transforming the world around him. Anyone who witnessed the transformation of the Salina at Camp Cherry Valley on Catalina Island, or has recently walked down to the landing of Lake of the Woods, or hiked up the hill to the old flagpole at Camp Lowell, should know that my dad was absolutely capable of real-world reforestation, just like Bouffier. He also liked to gather nuts, like walnuts from the neighbor. But my dad also understood that The Man Who Planted Trees is a story that goes deeper than just the literal planting of acorns. And as I look out at all of you here today, I can't help but see a great forest full of trees. And we few gathered here are just the edge of that forest. Now, that's not to imply that without my dad, you'd all be just a bunch of nuts. You can decide, you know best. I can at least say for my own part, and I think I speak for my family, that we feel honored and privileged to have been able to share our father with each of you. Throughout my life, I was often asked, what's it like to be Delose's son? Or Mr. Conner's son, I guess depending on if you're in the scout uniform world or the bow tie world. I don't think I ever really gave a good answer. And that was partly because it seemed like an odd question to me coming from people who knew him. Because with my dad, what you see is what you get, and he treated almost everyone like family. So to me, it always just felt like kind of a rhetorical question. You should know. But today, I would like to at least share a little bit of what I experienced growing up, and the humble and diligent acts my dad performed to help to shape my life. I remember one time, when I was probably about 9 years old, I was playing in the front yard with the girl who lived next door. And I don't remember why, but for some reason I was just so angry that I was crying. And I balled up my little fists, and I was about to lunge at her. And what I didn't see was, through my tears, was my dad had pulled into the driveway. And he jumped out of the car, and he ran over, and he caught me mid-leap. The neighbor girl just ran off home, and my dad carried me over, and he sat me on the wall of our porch at our house, right at eye level, where I had to look at him. And then he said in his stern dad voice, "Don't you ever hit a girl." Now I remember feeling a little bit betrayed. I thought I was the one who'd been wronged, And I couldn't understand why he felt the need to defend her since she was bigger and tougher than I was. But now, thanks to Leif, I realized he probably reminded him of Linda. She probably reminded him of Linda a little bit. But what I've also grown to understand is that my dad was trying to teach me two things: care and respect. A care and a respect which he exemplified throughout his life for all things made by the hand of God. But most especially for Heavenly Father's daughters, which I'm 100% certain my dad saw as God's greatest creations. In no other way was this more evident than in the way he treated my mother. I know they had moments that weren't ideal, just like anybody, but I never witnessed any act of violence towards my mother from him, and he certainly didn't tolerate any disrespect from me towards her. Over the past few days, we've reminisced extensively on his many accomplishments, but there was never any doubt what he considered to be his greatest accomplishment. As Allison has already pointed out, he would often gesture to my mom and say, "My greatest accomplishment." Of course, he'd always point to himself and say, "Her one mistake." But my mom always contradicted him. Now I know we're here to remember him, and while I'm sure he appreciates all the wonderful things that have been said about him, I think he will not be fully satisfied unless I pointed out that many of the best bits that we love most about him are thanks to my mom. That being said, to care for and respect all of God's creations was a consistent and daily message from my father to me. There was another day when I was probably about 14, and I had just come home from church, and I was ready to jump out of my church clothes, grab my typical Sunday lunch of grilled cheese and ramen noodles, when my dad said he needed my help. So we went and got back in the car, in our church clothes, which didn't matter to him because his church clothes were the same as his normal clothes. But to me it mattered. And we drove back down the street to an elderly neighbor lady's house to take her the sacrament. It was the first time I'd ever done what I later learned is called shut-ins. It's where you take the sacrament to people who were not able to come to church themselves. My dad continued to go to her house each week for several months. Sometimes I went, sometimes he took my brothers. I'll admit that at first it was something I dreaded. But it didn't take long before I realized that as much as I didn't want to go, it always felt good afterwards. There are two lessons I learned from my dad that this story illustrates. First, sometimes you have to do things you don't want to, simply because you must, because nobody else can. Whether it's mounting a bear patrol in the middle of the night, or pumping Kybos at the end of the summer, or being the vice president of the Relief Society. Of course, I know some of you believe that he actually enjoyed pumping the Kybos, and to some extent he probably did. All those treasures to be found. But that's maybe the deeper lesson for me. Not only could I do things that I didn't want to, but I could enjoy doing them if I did them for the right reasons. Now that brings me to the second lesson I learned from taking the sacrament to our neighbor, which is the reason why God condescended to grant us his power in the first place. When I was 8, my dad baptized me in the Lake of the Woods. Some of you were there. When I was 12, he conferred me the Aaronic priesthood. When I was getting ready to leave on my mission, he gave me the Melchizedek priesthood and ordained me an elder. And when I got called to the bishopric, he ordained me a high priest. And those are gifts from my father that I will always cherish. But even more importantly, he showed me why I had been given those gifts. He prayed daily for me and my siblings and blessed us when we were sick or afraid or sad. He often willingly left our home to minister to neighbors, when I'm sure he would have rather just sat in his chair reading a book. He taught me how to pray, how to hope, how to believe, and how to love. One simple act at a time, my dad showed me every day to use what I had been given to bless the lives of others. Like planting trees, he showed me every day what a loyal husband and loving father is. The opening paragraph of The Man Who Planted Trees reads, "For a human character to reveal truly exceptional qualities, one must have the good fortune to be able to observe its performance over many years. If this performance is devoid of all egoism, if its guiding motive is unparalleled generosity, if it's absolutely certain that there is no thought of recompense, and that, in addition, it has left its visible mark on the earth, then there can be no mistake. Delose Conner, you have shown your quality, sir, the very highest." One final thing I remember as a child. At the beginning of every summer, my dad would leave and go to camp to set things up. Our family always missed him, but we knew that he was in an amazing place, doing what he loved, with some of the best people ever. We also knew it wouldn't be long before we could join him there, in that beautiful place where we could have endless adventures together. I can't think of a better way to explain how I feel. Now you know how we felt. Thank you, Dad, for all you did. I love you, and I look forward to seeing you again.